The Housing Assistance Council is a national nonprofit that supports affordable housing efforts throughout rural America. Since 1971, HAC has provided below-market financing for affordable housing and community development, technical assistance and training, research and information, and policy formulation to enable solutions for rural communities. Welcome to today's webinar. Today we'll be discussing the grant funding opportunity for HAC's Affordable Housing for Rural Veterans Initiative, otherwise known as AHRV. Today is an open forum to discuss the current RFP, including a high-level overview of the RFP and a walkthrough of the frequently asked questions, along with an opportunity to pose questions directly to the program staff. Thank you to the Home Depot Foundation for sponsoring today's event. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Anselmo Tejas has over 28 years of experience with HAC, and he has experience working with single-family, multifamily, farm labor, and subdivision developments. Anselmo coordinates loan fund information and services and products throughout the Southwest region. He's assisted nonprofit organizations throughout the region to build organizational capacity and project development expertise in HUD, including home, and USDA rural development housing programs. Anselmo also assists in the coordination of HAC's colonias and loan fund initiatives and projects specifically targeting to groups serving colonia residents. Anselmo has received home program certifications regulations. It's also my pleasure to introduce Shantaria Charleston, who oversees HAC's Training and Technical Assistance Division. In her role, Shantaria manages HAC's capacity building programs, which include HUD's Rural Capacity Building and Veterans Rehabilitation and Modification programs, USDA's Rural Community Development Initiative, Community Facilities Technical Assistance, and Rural Placemaking Innovation Challenge programs, and the Affordable Housing for Rural Veterans Initiative. Terry also provides oversight and management of HAC's training activities to include the biennial National Rural Housing Conference. Prior to this position, Shantaria served as the Programs and Training Manager and provided direct technical assistance on organizational capacity building, nonprofit governance, management, development, strategic planning, and transformation related to an array of programs including home, single-family housing development, and HUD Section 202-811 supportive housing programs. Shantaria is a veteran of the United States Armed Forces, Army Active Component, and the Georgia Army National Guard. She holds a master's degree from Central Michigan University, a bachelor's degree from St. Leo University, is a Harvard University Kennedy School of Government and Georgia Military College graduate alumna, is HUD Home Program Regulation certified, and is recognized as a HUD Energy Champion. And now I'd like to hand the mic over to Shantaria Charleston.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Uh-oh. Are they about to play Sugar Baby again? Stephanie, what should I do? All right, perfect. All right. Thank you. So let me take control. All right. So as I was saying, happy Wednesday, but then more specifically, happy New Year. Thank you for joining us for the webinar today. As the introduction Stephanie said, I am Shantaria Charleston, the Director of Training and Technical Assistance here at the Housing Assistance Council. And I will be joined by my colleague Anselmo today. And we will be going through giving a brief overview of the 2024 request for proposal guidelines and also walking through the application. And so before we get started, I'd like to take a brief moment to reiterate the thanks and also acknowledge our very generous sponsor, the Home Depot Foundation. The Home Depot Foundation has been a really critical to HAC's ability to maintain our affordable housing for veterans initiative. And so as we go through the webinar today, we're going to give out the information, but we're also going to set aside some time at the end of the webinar to answer as many questions as time permits. And so that being said, I'll get started, but before we do, want to remind everyone that the webinar is being recorded, and so both the recording and the presentation will be available on HAC's website, www.ruralhome.org, following the broadcast. And so our brief agenda for today, you'll see it on the screen. We'll begin with some general program and initiative information. We're going to cover eligible uses. The main portion is going to be the application scoring and information. We're going to talk about the submission, the due dates, as well as successful application completion and tips for success on the application. And then, as I said, we'll allow time at the end for Q&A. I want to first start out by doing a few poll questions. Stephanie, can we get the poll questions up? All right. So if you'll take a brief moment to please respond to the poll questions. The first one is, are you a current or previous HAC AHRV grantee? Super important question. Super important. All right, so we'll give folks another second or two. I see the scale moving, the meter moving. Looks like, okay. Looks like about 10% of us on the webinar are current or previous AHRV grantees, and about 90% are new. And so we are really excited to have all of the new potential groups joining us. And so we're going to move on to the second question. How many years has your organization served veterans? Just starting out, 0 to 5 years. Well, I guess that would be 0 if you're just starting out. So 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or more than 10 years. And so if you go ahead and submit your responses. Awesome. All right. Very interesting. We've got some groups that are just starting out, about 10%. Some folks that have around about 5 years, a little bit less than 5 years, maybe 25% or so. We've got some more experienced groups, about 13%. And then it looks like we've got some real experts here, veteran service experts, about 53% of the group. And then the last question, the last poll question, does your veteran program have a current waiting list? And these are all important questions. You'll see why as Anselmo goes through the information on the application, why we're asking these questions and how they become relevant to the success of your potential application. All right. Wow, so great. So at least about 35% of us have waiting lists, a little bit over 35%. We'll give a few more seconds for people that are, thank you, Kathy. We do see your response. We appreciate that. All right, so roughly about 40% yes with the waiting list, and about 60% no with the waiting list. Not a big deal, but great if you have a waiting list. All right. So let's go ahead and dive right in, because I do want to reserve the lion's share of the time for Anselmo to walk through the application process and talk about submission information, and then as well as the Q&A portion, which we're hoping that you guys take full advantage of. And so let me advance the slide. All right. Want to talk a little bit about HAC's Affordable Housing for Rural Veterans Initiative, or what we affectionately refer to as our AHRV program. The AHRV program is a program, it's an initiative funded by the Home Depot Foundation, and it has the sole intent of supporting the development and modification and or repair of veteran-owned housing units or units occupied by veterans in rural America. And so some quick examples would be homeowner units, rental units, as well as some maybe transitional units. Let's see. So some types of activities. I'll talk a little bit about the types of projects. The types of projects, the AHRV is intended to support brick and mortar projects, really vertical development projects that either provide temporary or permanent housing for veterans. And really it is depending upon the needs of your local community. And so if you say, well, we have rental units that we provide veterans, that's not going to score any better than homeowner units. It really does, again, go back to, are your units meeting the needs in your community? Let's see, the maximum grant award is typically, we do per organization is $30,000. However, depending upon the severity of need, we have some flexibility in terms of the maximum amounts. And so if the need is greater or the project has scarcity of resources, if you would, please, you should go ahead and submit the fuller request and we will review those as necessary. I will say that while there is a typical maximum amount, there is no minimum amount an organization can request. And so if your need is, if you have a gap of say $15,000, we will consider applications at amounts, from 0 to 30,000, and in some cases where you can show a severity of need, even the higher amounts. But the typical maximum grant award is $30,000 per organizations. Funds can be used on scattered sites and across an entire service area, or if you're doing a subdivision development, if there's a piece of the development project that you need to fill a gap in, you can also use it as part of that. The one thing to remember though is that if you are submitting projects for scattered sites, you need only submit one application and include the different housing units or what have you in that one application. You can only submit one request, please. Again, a little bit about the eligible uses, development and or rehabilitation. The units must be for low-income veterans. The cost would be hard costs, and this is the sticks and bricks and things like that, or some of the soft costs if you're acting as a general contractor. This program is really flexible. The funding is really flexible. But again, we want to make sure that we reiterate that this is a brick and mortar program. The current slides talking about the eligible uses. Again, variety of activities. You don't need to have one specific thing. If there's something that you're doing that's unique, we want to hear that as well. But again, it's very flexible, but it really is intended to do brick and mortar projects. Again, I said this before, general rehabilitation, general development, homeowner repair. We see a lot of homeowner repair coming in. We see a lot of rental preservation. And then we also have funded quite a few, not as many, transitional housing facility rehabilitation on transitional housing facilities. So again, very flexible in what the funds can be used for, but it has to go toward brick and mortar projects, if you would. The grant terms are typically for 1 year. And so we are seeking projects that will either be complete or substantially complete within 12 months from the date of funding. And so when we say substantially complete, those are groups, or those are sometimes units that have been already identified, or as we asked the poll question up front, those folks that already have an established waiting list. That's not to say that if you are if you don't have, units identified that would disqualify you. It is really the priority though, because we run our programs on an annual basis. And so we are looking to fund those groups that are actually ready to see or be near substantial completion within the year of funding. So a little bit about the unit eligibility. The units must be built or preserved for veterans. And we use the definition that is provided by the Department of Veteran Affairs. And that is that any person who served on active military, naval, or air service and who was discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. There is further guidance from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and we will include some links in the along with the webinar information that directs you to this information or the definition that's provided by the Department of Veteran Affairs. But the Department of Veteran Affairs further provides that those reservists or members of the National Guard that were called to federal active duty or disabled from a disease or injury incurred or aggravated in the line of duty while on training status, they would also qualify as veterans. Again, no need to try and write this down. We are going to make this information available with the webinar recording and materials following the webinar. Also want to provide some information or guidance on what is considered low income. So the term low income is defined as income that does not exceed 80% of the median income for a specific area. And so to determine if a veteran meets the income qualifications guidelines, HAC allows nonprofits to use either the annual income as defined by 24 CFR part 5.609. And this is typically all income earned by all members of a household, the specifics of which we, again, will provide in a link. So no need to try and write that down. We'll provide all of that in a link. So in addition to using the IRS annual income, you can use in addition to using the annual income, you can either use the adjusted gross income, and that is really the income as defined for the purposes of reporting under the IRS 1040 for individual federal earnings. So either or. The one thing to remember as you approach figuring out which definition you're going to use is that you may use one or the other. And so if you have a group of, say, 5 veterans that you're going to assist, if you are going to use it for veteran number 1, you must also use that same definition for veterans number 2 through 5. You won't be able to interchange the definitions or whichever method you use to qualify the veterans for their income. So whichever method you use, just make sure that it's the same standard across all units and all veterans assisted if you are awarded funds. Again, the funds go towards costs related to specific hard and soft costs, development and or rehabilitation projects. There is a caveat, as I mentioned earlier. I think I briefly ran by it. If your organization is acting as its own general contractor, you are able to include and cover some management or administrative fees. However, you would need to show that the organization is acting as its own general contractor. That was really fast. Again, the information is going to be put up on HAC's website following this broadcast. And so at this point, because I want to reserve the lion's share of the time to focus on the application, and then to get to the Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Anselmo.
Thank you, Terry. I'm taking control here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for taking time from your day to join us on this webinar. We are so excited that we're able to have another round in 2024 of our AHRV initiative. We can't thank the Home Depot Foundation enough. And this Veterans Day, they made an additional $250 million commitment to assist veterans. And so we are very thankful that we have the great support of the foundation. And let me pick up where Terry left off, and I just wanted to just maybe add a little bit to how you want to use the type of income verification. What we have found is that some of our organizations say, you know, in the disability benefits maybe are considered non-taxable. And if you use the 80% route, you may have to include those. So I just wanted to give you that hint that if you have a group of veterans and they're disabled and they are receiving disability payments, you may want to consider the 1040 route. So I just wanted to kind of add to that. Also, I want to say that even though we're asking this or we're trimming this application, it really is an RFP. We're requesting proposals. We don't have the money right now. We are going to put together our proposal probably in March. And so this process is we are asking organizations to submit their applications, and we then will underwrite and select the organizations that we are going to request to get funded in our proposal. So I think it's important that I at least tell you now that even though we are here in January, that the whole process will run through the spring, and we will probably not be able to disperse funds until maybe um, um, May or June, so into the summer. So I need to mention that because as you put together your proposal, and you think about identifying the veterans, that's why we asked up front. We hope that you have a list, right? That if some veterans need immediate kind of assistance and you have other resources, you can take care of those, and then just kind of look down the road. Where will you be, like in May or June, in terms of the veterans that you identify for your proposal? So let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do once we get your proposal. We have a scoring process, and we will be looking at the following in terms of what we um, will be evaluating, and that will be, and I'll talk more about these individually, the organizational capacity, the what you are proposing to use the funds for, and I also want to take a little time to emphasize a little more on this. The need for funds, and then the project outcomes. And I can't emphasize enough um, the project outcomes. We really are interested in what the impact is in the veterans' lives and the conditions that you are mitigating. So first, under organizational capacity, um, we are looking for groups that have been serving veterans um, or have related experience in the types of assistance that would be provided. So we're looking for minimal organizational capacity, and we will be evaluating through your financial statements, through your funding sources, determining administrative funding capacity, um, your policies and procedures if you have them for instance a rehab program, and then we will be looking at governance. You know, are you a broad-based nonprofit? Um, you have a diverse board. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at in terms of organizational capacity. Um, we're going to be looking at is your project realistic based on your staffing, based on your experience. And then remember what Terry said, we will be looking at the project hopefully to be completed within a 12-month period. So if you're proposing a rehab project and can complete in 12 months, I think we're going to be okay with that. If you're proposing transitional housing or multifamily and it's part of a bigger development and you're proposing to use some of these funds for multifamily and those funding sources have yet, the major portion of those funding sources are still being developed and not secured, we're going to think it's probably unlikely that you're going to get this multifamily project done in the next 12 months. So just so that you know that that's going to be part of what we're looking at. And based on your history, the number of staff, you know, do you have the staff capacity to do the work. If you're proposing to qualify veterans, do the work write-ups, and then put the project out to bid, that's one scenario. But if you're going to do what I just said, plus do the work, acting in the capacity of a contractor, as Terry said, then do you have the crew? Do you have the experience? Do you have the license to act in the capacity of a contractor? And then, of course, we're going to look at, what is your mission? What is your experience serving veterans, right? We're going to be looking at, do you work with local veteran organizations, whether they be service or health? Do you have an association or some working relationship with local veterans service providers? And then, of course, the proposed use and need for funds. So I'm just going to go over this real quick, and then I just want to go kind of off and talk a little bit more about some very important particulars. So we are looking. So you must clearly outline what your project is going to be, right? We want you to describe and illustrate to us how you're going to increase the veteran housing in your community and lead to more sustainable veteran housing program. Let me see what the next slide is here, because I wanted to cover some things. There we go, proposed use of funds. So as Terry said, we're looking at brick and mortar, which is basically hard cost development to assist the low income elderly and or disabled veteran with critical home repair and rehab needs. Support homeless veterans, help veterans become homeowners, and to support rehabilitation or affordable veteran occupied rental housing. Now, this presentation will be available online, so you can kind of come back and look at this. When we're looking at critical home repairs, they will include things like roofs, plumbing, accessibility, ramps, ADA, showers, windows, weatherization, those kinds of activities. What we're not looking, what we want to make a distinction here about what's critical and what's not. So, for instance, painting as part of a rehab, you did replace the sheetrock, you mudded it and then you painted, that's fine. So painting as part of an item is great, but to paint just to paint is not going to be eligible unless it's part of maybe replacing siding, or so we're saying not cosmetic. We've also seen like replacement of cabinets. So replacement of cabinets just to replace the cabinets is not an eligible item, but replacing cabinets as part of an ADA modification, lowering, opening the access, those kinds of things are definitely eligible. When we think of the types of repairs, we're thinking of heated space. So anything to do with addressing the heated space, the living area of a unit is what we're looking at. We're really not looking at repairs to storage sheds, external structures, garage. When we think of accessibility, we think of ramps, we think of wider doorways, we think of ADA or roll-in showers. We're not talking about access to the property or access to the home. In which case, we're not looking to do a road, right, to or pave a road to the home. That's not the kind of accessibility or access that we're looking for. So I wanted to take time to just kind of emphasize that. We're looking at in the proposal, there will be a project budget form. please, we ask that you complete and submit that form. You can submit an additional addendum, which explains in greater detail what it is that you're going to do, how much each project, each rehab, each item of development is going to cost. But we definitely would like you to use that project. Matter of fact, we're going to, if you don't use our form, we'll consider it missing, right? So please use our budget and then use an addendum. We have had cases where folks have said, see the addendum, and then they don't include the addendum. But so to make it easier, let's just please include the budget that's provided in the application. That budget will also give you an opportunity to provide a narrative. So please complete the narrative portion on the budget. Also in the proposal itself, we will ask you what is the proposed use of funds, and you'll have an opportunity to fill in the application and tell us in as great a detail as you can what it is that you're proposing to do. We always ask for project outcomes, but sometimes it's hard. The organization doesn't know exactly, how to maybe phrase that. But we're looking at, how did you impact the life of the veteran? Did you, what issue was mitigated? Um, if 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 you're looking at an elderly couple, and you're rehabbing their home, and now you're making it safe, it's accessible, it's warm and dry, and you're providing a place now for this couple to age in place. Those are exactly the kinds of things we want to hear, right? The impact that the funds will provide for the veterans that you will be assisting. I know that this is the applicant, this is the slide that's up, but I want to go back and just emphasize some of these things that through various inquiries that we've had up until now, our experience with some of the issues that we've addressed. I want to talk about, and Terry talked about how flexible our program is, and that is, one, we're emphasizing critical repairs and removal of health and safety hazards. That's kind of like the main focus. We want you to know that this is considered a reimbursable grant, right? So let's use the $30,000 number, and what we do is if you're successful, we will disperse 80% of our grant upfront to you. Then you will account for those 80%, plus you will need then to have the resources available to provide the remaining 6,000, which is the 20%, and then you will submit your final report accounting for 100% of the funds, and we will reimburse you the $6,000. So I want to be sure that that's clear, that it's a reimbursable, but we do advance funds, and then the organization will be responsible for completing the project and then submitting for the total amount. There are a number of factors that we will consider in determining the amount of the grant. Sometimes folks, well, we've had instances where folks will apply for, let's say, 4 units and $60,000. Yet we know that the minimum, I mean, the maximum is going to be 30,000. So we may look at it and say, well, it looks feasible, but we can only do 30, so we're only going to approve 30 for 2 units instead of the 4. So we retain that. When we want you to know that, we will work with you to try to always say yes to something. We occasionally have looked at what was submitted and looked at the other resources, and so we may provide maybe a little bit less than you requested, but we will let you know why. one of the things that we want to also emphasize is that the program is for veteran-owned and occupied homes. So just by the term veteran-owned and occupied, we've had organizations that have asked us about assisting the surviving spouse of a veteran, and because this is veteran-owned and occupied, surviving spouse are not eligible. So just wanted to let you know that as you think about how you use the funds and where you focus them. As I said before, we're looking at health and safety, weather-tight environment, external things like replacing a septic system, roofs, ADA ramps, modifications. And again, we're talking about repairs to the heated space. Some of the things that are not, that we probably will not be looking at, or they have shown up a few times and we've had to kind of figure out how to work it out. And that is, we've had some organizations that have done something called a do it yourself, where they'll fund the homeowner because they have certain skills. We really don't want to see that. We want to see the organization involved in the process, in monitoring the expenditures, in looking that the work is done in a workmanlike manner, and that inspections are done of the work. So we're looking at the quality assurance and that the project was done. So DIY projects, do it yourself for the homeowner, we discourage that. Also, in terms of the soft costs, we can look at fees and we can look at renting equipment. We can maybe look at, the backhoe, a few hours to dig a trench for the leach lines on a septic, those kinds of things. But purchasing equipment is not an eligible purpose. All right, maybe renting or leasing, but not equipment purchase. Also, appliances. We've had some times when folks have asked us about appliances. If you're doing a modification and you're looking to replace a refrigerator, just to replace a refrigerator, that's not going to be an eligible item. But if there's a health and safety issue, if the veteran is diabetic, they need a place to store their insulin. We just want to know, and if you're not sure, ask us what the situation is. But appliances, for the most part, are not going to be an eligible item. They have to be related to a health and safety or justify what it is that makes this a critical need. All right. Okay, I think I've covered the cosmetic. To paint, just to paint, is not eligible, and cabinets must be, kind of tied to something else. So, so in terms of the application itself, we have the Word application available online. Most folks, will go ahead and copy that and convert it to a PDF, and those are the two formats that we will accept. The exhibits can be either Word or PDF. We would like to see the proposal come in all in one document if possible, but sometimes that gets to be too big. So if you find that you're uploading or that when you are converting over the documents, or you're trying to send them to us in an email and your email won't accept it, if it's too large, go ahead and submit it in two separate transmissions, but please label and say email application 1 of 2, and then the second email will be 2 of 2, right? And then that way we know that it is a 2-part submittal. And please look at the attachments that are required, and please be sure that they are part of your application. Some organizations work with grant writers, and I think that's wonderful. But then it's also important the person that actually sends it to us, the person that makes sure that all of the documentation is there and everything that the grant writer checked off on the boxes in terms of included exhibits, that they are actually part of the application, that you don't forget to include those. All right. Um, so one of the things that we will definitely emphasize and have emphasized is the completeness of the application. If there's a question, please answer it if you can. If not, just put NA. But we've received applications with some portions that were left out. And it's important that, you know, the questions are there for a reason. So please, you know, try to answer all of the questions. So incomplete applications, you know, will not meet threshold. If you forget something once you submit your application, for instance, oh my goodness, we didn't submit a certification, a rural certification with the application, and so we're not going to accept it sent as a separate item. We're going to ask you to resubmit your application with the additional information, as long as it is submitted prior to the due date. If you submit it on the due date and then realize that you missed something, it's going to be an incomplete application. All right. So just to remind you, our applications are due on January 22nd. They're going to be due at 4 p.m. Eastern, and we've laid it out here for each time zone. We have to say this up front. We're really sorry. If your application comes in at 4:01, it's not going to meet the deadline. So that's going to be on you, the applicant, to be sure that you submit it with sufficient time. All right. Okay. Also, like I said before, you know, we will accept the Word or the PDF. If handwritten applications will not be accepted. All right. We appreciate that, you know, you submit the application, but it's really hard sometimes to read some, or we're not sure. We definitely need for it to be submitted as we've requested. Okay, so I want to go through some tips on completing the application. Complete and answer all the sections, as I've said before. Include all the required exhibits. When you look at the application, there's also some exhibits that we ask you to check off as being included in the application. Please look at that again before you submit. All right. And then be sure that it's signed by the authorized representative of the organization. Usually that's the executive director, but it could also be a program manager. We're going to ask you for your tax exempt legal status, your 501c3 or tribal designation letter, your IRS letter. So we will be looking for that. Unless, of course, you're, for instance, a public housing authority or some other organization, but in that particular case, we also want you to maybe submit your charter so that we'll know the type of organization that you are. We did not include certificate of good standing in the application. We keep forgetting to include it, but that's why we ask folks to please wait to submit their application until we've had an opportunity to have this webinar. And so we will be looking for organizations to submit a certificate of good standing for your local, from your state Secretary of State's office, indicating that you are an organization in good standing. And we will be looking at that closely this year. This is a very, very competitive grant. It really pains us that you know, we have so many good applications, and so every little thing that we're asking for, we're going to weigh it, we're going to score it. So as much information as you can provide is going to help in the scoring process. We're going to ask for your current operating budget, your year to date through at least September of 2023. It doesn't, and we're also going to ask you for your financial statement, your latest audit, 22 financial statements or IRS 990. All right. Some organizations that are very, very small, are not required to maybe do an audit or a 990, but just let us know. And then there's also a specific form for organizations that I believe are less than $750,000 a year. We have a separate form for listing your board members and their affiliation and their diversity composition. We want to know about this information, so please go through that and fill that out for us. And then your project budget, as I said before, you know, if you give us something that says see attachment and you don't complete the budget that we asked you, it's going to be incomplete. We need for you to complete that budget. If you're doing a multifamily project, we're gonna ask you, what assurances do we have that the unit will be affordable to veterans and for how long? So it's an assurance occupancy agreement that we're going to ask you to submit. If you're looking at doing a multifamily project, I think we have a sample. Call us ahead of time. We'll provide it to you, and you can include it in your application. As I said before, updates to your application after the submittal date will not be accepted. We do ask you in the application, you know, what is your service area? And these are the kinds of areas that we're looking at, Northwest, Southwest, Midwest. We do this because we also want to compile demographics. Part of what we do, not only are we able to provide assistance or pass through money to organizations, we also at the Housing Assistance Council have a veterans data portal that we maintain with great data information about veterans and housing and poverty, and we use this information to collect information for that data portal. So please feel free to visit the HAC website. If you're doing another proposal to somebody else and want to collect information on veterans, please feel free to visit our data portal. We're also going to be interested in high needs areas, right? If you're not sure, I mean, we'll try to research a little bit, but please give us some sense of your region and your location. Okay, we talked about the underserved areas. There's a place in the application where we ask you, do you have a Home Depot connection, right? Are you receiving funding from the Home Depot? If yes, what is the nature of that funding and what does it support? So we want to be sure that we're not funding a project that Home Depot is directly funding with an organization. So think about that, and please be sure you answer that yes or no, because we have to know. Okay. Okay, well, I think I'm 3 minutes over, but we wanted to leave time for questions and answers. Let me go through my glance my quick sheet over here and be sure that I've covered everything. When it comes to home ownership rather than rehab, it's a little bit trickier to assess the impact because we're going to want you to offset the cost of construction, and if there's a mortgage involved, the impact on the payment may not be as much. So we want you to assess that, and so home ownership is a little bit trickier in terms of the impact. If you're saying we're going to do one home and it's going to reduce the veteran's payment by $25 versus we're going to do 4 homes and we're going to make ADA accessibility for 4 veteran families, the impact is different. So, and also HAC does not require a match. A lot of our organizations, as we noticed in the poll, I believe 65% are experienced organizations and probably serving veterans with some other funding. So we can we appreciate when organizations leverage funds, and we want you to tell us that, right? We're going to use the AHRV funds in conjunction with other funding, even if it's fundraising funds, right? And together, instead, you know, we're going to do instead of doing 3 units, we're going to do 5 units because we're going to bring in additional funds. We like to hear that. It's not necessarily part of the scoring, because we're looking at what you propose to do with the AHRV funds. But if you're leveraging other funds, please tell us. All right. One other thing, in the application, we provide you a link to a USDA website, which is called, or you can do a Google search on USDA property eligibility, but we give you the link. We're going to ask you to please access that link, go to the 502 Direct, check off the I accept, whatever it is, and then put the address of at least one of the groups that you're going to serve. Hopefully you have the addresses to all of the veterans that you've identified, and that you can generate um, a, a, a rural certification um, printout for us. This is our way of knowing that because the funds are specifically for rural, to serve rural veterans, that the property location is in fact a rural property, as determined by USDA Rural Development, which serves rural organizations. Like I said before, we know that this is a little bit spread out in terms of timing. So if you have a waiting list, you're not quite sure, but you have a general idea of the locations of the properties, or if your service area is strictly in a rural county, then give us some location. Even if the property doesn't come up, you can pin it manually and submit that and say, this is our service area. But if you are able to identify your veterans and have a sense of their address, please fill that out. And if you have any questions, again, please feel free to write us, ahrv@ruralhome.org. All right. So, okay, sorry, a little over, but I want to open it up for questions. Terry?
No, well, I think I've done a fairly decent job of keeping up with the questions that have appeared in the chat. I did just also reinsert the eligibility link that we are asking potential applicants to use when verifying the rurality of their veteran units. And so it's there in the link. It is also included as part of the application. I want to say that it's on the next to the last page as a link there as well. So you have the access to it via the actual application, as well as it being inserted here in the chat a few times. There was also a question about finding out the income or being able to pull the AMI chart for your county or location. We've included the link for both HUD and HAC's Veterans Data Central. Most of that information is going to be the absolute same. But thank you so much to Dan from our tech team for pointing out, like, we should be using our information. So the Veterans Data Central information link is there, as well as the HUD user link. Let's see, with wheelchair ramps, thank you, John, for the question. John P wants to know, would wheelchair ramps and rotten porches be eligible? Absolutely, yes. Lynn wants to know, as a Habitat for Humanity affiliate, could we use the funds to purchase land for a veteran build, even if the house will not be built within a 1-year period? You would be able to land to as part of development for new construction, it sounds like. However, the application probably will not do as well, considering that the completion date is not within, the substantial completion date is not within 12 months of the funding. And so in that case, we might ask you to come back for a future round. But I would not say that it is not an eligible purpose. It is eligible. It's just the timing that's going to perhaps come into play on that one. Shauna also has a question. Suppose we have a project for home repair, but we find out while completing home repair that the client needs an appliance as well. Is this something we describe in our report to funders? Also, what it completing home repair clients need other wraparound services such as utility assistance or a permit for installation? Can funding be used for this? So Shauna, funding for a new appliance, we typically don't do appliances with this program. We also don't do utility assistance with this program. However, if you would reach out to us offline, want to ask a few more questions about the severity and need of the appliances. You know, maybe the veteran is a diabetic and otherwise does not able, you know, to purchase a new refrigerator. So there are very extenuating circumstances. So I would ask for you, Shauna, to please reach out to us via email so that we can set up a time to discuss with you. The email for contact for us is ahrv@ruralhome.org. Let's see. Could you clarify certificate of good standing on slide 28 versus the IRS tax exempt? So yeah, absolutely. So the IRS is the determination that the organization gets once it at establishment, when it establishes itself as a nonprofit organization. The certificate of good standing comes from the Secretary of State's office, and it really is an annual certification with the Secretary of State to say that you are in good standing and operating in accordance to the state laws for organizations or nonprofit organizations. And that's in response to Morgan. Allie wants to know, how many grants do you typically award? That's a really great question, Allie. As we said, this is a super competitive process. In the last 2 to 3 cycles, we've awarded anywhere between 10 and 16 awards. And so that gives you some idea of the competitiveness of the program. Let's see. Kathy wants to revisit the home repair question. Kathy, let's follow up offline about the mobile home question. There are some specific questions depending upon the state and kind of who owns the mobile home park, those sorts of things, that it's not a general answer, yes or no. And so if you would please send us an email to ahrv@ruralhome.org so that we can set up a time to discuss the specifics of your location and ownership of that mobile home property. Let's see, we've got a question from John David. Hey, John, how are you? John wants to know, are repairs for heating systems eligible? Heating systems eligible. I would say that's a very similar question to Kathy's. And Selma, do you want to, I hear you responding on that.
Yeah, so HVAC systems, heating and cooling, those are absolutely eligible items, right? So it'd be the purchase of the units and their installation, or it'll be the purchase of the unit, and if the organization is acting in the capacity of a contractor and they're able to install it, those are all eligible purposes. So heating and cooling HVAC units are an eligible purpose.
Perfect. Thank you. And that's also applicable to your question, Kathy. So thank you for your question as well. Leah says, is there a minimum number of veterans served you are looking for? There is not a minimum number of veterans. However, because of the competitive nature of this particular program, we are looking to have the greatest impact. And so, you know, there's not a minimum number, but we will be taking all things into consideration if we get to a point where it's just so many applications versus what it is that we can fund. Let's see. Sarah wants to know, when does the letter of good standing need to be dated? We have one from May of 2023. That would suffice. That is actually within the year. And so I would say the letter of good standing or the certificate of good standing needs to be dated within the year of the date of your application. Kathy, I think the water heater portion of the question is really the same as the heating systems, since the water heater is a essential component of a home. Tammy wants to know, currently have a home repair program. Could we apply for supplemental funding if we specify rural veterans? You could absolutely apply. But any funds that you use would have to go towards the veteran units. It wouldn't be able to be used across your entire home repair program. Those funds would have to go directly into the veteran units. Thank you for that question, Tammy. Let's see, we have 1 minute remaining in the webinar. Are there any other questions or something that we did not address? Does vinyl siding and holes? Yes. That makes the house livable, and it goes into the ability to heat the home properly. So yes, Kathy, vinyl siding, the repair of the vinyl sidings would be an eligible activity. Any other questions? All right.
Well,
So
Terry,
yes.
while we're waiting for other questions, the citing question just reminded me of something. Occasionally we get requests for, is tree removal an authorized purpose? And if it's a tree and it is a hazard to the home, and a storm could topple the tree and damage the home, or if you're needing to remove the tree to clear the leach field for a septic, we consider all of those, and those would be, in those cases, would be eligible purpose. All right. I just want to
Thank
throw
you.
that in there while we're
Nope,
waiting for the next question.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Erlene wants to know, is window replacement, yes, Erlene, it absolutely is. Richard, hey Richard, how are you? Is there a minimum level of disability to be eligible as a vet? There are no minimum levels of disability. As long as they qualify as an eligible veteran, they qualify for assistance. And so, right, Megan, that's correct. Jeff Phillips, and this is the last question because we are over on time. This webinar has been informative, but sadly, this area does not qualify the HAC programs. Love to learn of more opportunities. Jeff, please send us an email. We still might have some additional resources that might be helpful to you. And so send us an email to ahrv@ruralhome.org. Is a DD-214 required to be on file? So Tammy, we would absolutely recommend that you get something to verify their veteran status, but you do not submit that information to HAC. You keep it there on file until or if to have it available if HAC or the Home Depot Foundation should need to review such files. But we do not require you to submit that information to us. We require you to do that verification. Let's see. The email is ahrv@ruralhome.org. I am putting it in the chat again. And it will also be in the guidelines and as part of the application. And so with that said, I want to thank everyone for their attention during today's webinar. I want to thank you for the wonderful, wonderful amount of questions that you had. And so we look very much forward to receiving all of the proposals. And again, if you have any questions before the application due date, please send us an email, and Selma and I will do our best to coordinate times where we can call and have discussions with you. We're going to try and answer as many emails. No, we will answer all emails. But if we get late emails asking for meetings or quick discussions, we're hoping to get all of that done before the application submission deadline. And so thank you again, and we appreciate everyone for their work that they're doing with veterans across rural America. Have a great evening. Thank you.